Oh, our next teller is Oni. I'd like to welcome Oni. Hi, Oni. I'd like to welcome Oni Lasana, a storyteller and poet who since 1992 has presented as a professional Chautauqua Oni, an armchair history teacher, has traveled the U.S., Germany, Caribbean, and Zimbabwe, bringing to life such trailblazing African-American women as Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Ellen Watkins Harper, and most recently, Ona Judge. Ona Judge was enslaved since birth. In May of 1796, at the age of 23, Ona Judge ran away from the household of President George and Martha Washington. And today you will meet Oni as Ona Judge, as a mature, free woman telling her courageous story about her quest for freedom. Please welcome Oni Lasana in an expert from our program, Ona Judge, Gone but Not Forgotten, a trailblazing woman.
Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Good evening, good people. My name is Ona Maria Judd Staines, and I was born in 1773 on a plantation called Mount Vernon in the state of Virginia. This plantation was also the home and the farm of Mr. George and Mrs. Martha Washington. Now, today you may see engraved on a memorial wall in Philadelphia my name written as Oni. Well, Oni was a nickname. My birth name is Ona, and I am so pleased to be able to tell you my story tonight. My mother was Betty Davis. She was an African, and she lived her entire life as a dower slave of Miss Martha's family. Well, my mother was a well trained and valuable seamstress. She, along with other women in the plantation, worked in the spinning house day in and day out. She would make clothes and they would sew and mend all the clothes for everyone in the estate. Do you know what a dower slave is? A dower slave is never sold off to anyone else, but kept as a slave for life, handed down in the family of owners from generation to generation. Well, Miss Martha Custis, she was a widow with 4 children when she remarried to Mr. Washington. And she brought with her, along with her dowry, with over 80 of her dower slaves to Mount Vernon. Sadly, chattel slavery was just the way of life back then. Now, you may be wondering who my daddy was. He was Andrew Judd from England. He worked as an indentured servant who was paid for his work. My father made the elegant blue uniform Mr. Washington wore when he became the first president of the United States. Now, I don't know if my mother loved my father or my father loved my mother, because in those days it was illegal for servants, as the Washingtons preferred to call their slaves, to marry each other, and let alone for any European man to marry an enslaved African woman. But my daddy and everybody knew I was his child. So when my daddy finished his servitude to the Washingtons, he left the plantation and we never saw him again. Now, Mr. Washington was a great soldier and freedom fighter, and for 8 years he led his troops and bravely fought for freedom from British rule in something they called the Revolutionary War. However, Mr. Washington also fancied himself a farmer, but he didn't do much work. All the working of the farm was done by over 300 of his African servants. But we were slaves, plain and simple. And that meant you were never paid for your work, and you would be dependent on your owner for everything. And you had to do everything and everything they told you to do. Well, I was just a child, and I heard lots of talks amongst my people down in the quarters. And we often thought that if Washington and his colonies were fighting to be free from the British Empire, then one day we could be free from them too. As a teenager, I came to understand how very important freedom was. And I didn't care what they thought about us. We are human beings too. And even though we was forced into slavery as human beings, we had every right to be free just like them. Well, when I was about 10 or 12 years old, my mother dressed me in a pretty dress and brand new secondhand shoes, and she took me by the hand and we walked up the road to the big house. Mama knocked on the door and she turned around and left me. I was to live and work as a personal handmaid to Miss Martha. Mama had always warned us to never say no or look mean around them folks. No eye contact, heads bowed, always smiling, no matter if we was happy or not. Always yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. Well, I stayed very quiet. I was seen but never heard. But I was always obedient to Miss Martha. She wasn't mean to me, but I was always afraid of them. Because many times I saw with my own eyes when my aunties and my uncles were rude or they tried to run away, they was beaten and whipped something terrible. Oh, when I was 16 years old, Mr. Washington was called on to be president of what they was calling America. They both hated having to leave Mount Vernon, and it was quite a paradise for them. And then once I heard them arguing, and Mr. Washington shouted out that he didn't risk his life and the death of over 25,000 soldiers to just sit back and retire. It was his duty. Now that the colonies were free, he had to make sure that something called democracy would succeed. So one day, I was told to get busy and pack up Miss Martha's finest clothing, and we were leaving for the first capital of America, a place up north called New York City. My mother cried as we loaded up the wagons and were prepared to leave, and she was hugging me and saying goodbye, and she whispered in my ear, "Pay attention, Ona. Maybe you can be free up north." I was crying too, but I never forgot my mother's words. The Washingtons took me, my brother Austin, and 5 other slaves to New York City, where we worked day and night, as they were always entertaining folks coming and going for meetings and parties. For 2 years, we lived in New York City, and I tended to Miss Martha's every needs. Then Mr. Washington, he became President Washington, and we all had to move down to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Huh. And we moved into what they called the President's Mansion. That move changed my life. It was in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, where I finally saw what freedom looked like. It was where I first saw free colored folks. The children were running to school. I had never learned to read or write. Folks owned their own businesses and homes, and most everyone was always dressed real nice. In the marketplace, everybody was friendly. They were talking and laughing and joking out loud with me. They were even building up their own church called the Mother Bethel Church, and it still stands in Philadelphia today. Oh, I became secret friends with the great Absalom Jones and Richard Allen of the Free African Society. Miss Martha, she carried me around town with her to shop, and I was well dressed too, because everyone knew who owned me. So I had to be dressed properly. Well, Miss Martha carried me along with her and her lady friends to see a play in a theater and a circus, mostly so I could mind her grandchildren. But with all that freedom, Philadelphia was still a dangerous place for many runaway slaves. In 1793, President Washington signed in the Fugitive Slave Law. That wicked law made it easier for slave owners to catch and take their property back down south into bondage. Oh, many times just to get the reward money, paddle-rollers would kidnap free Africans and say they were slaves when they were free men and women. It was a terrible law. One day, Hercules, our cook, told us about a new state law that said if someone ran away or any slave folks lived in Philadelphia for more than 6 months, they would be free. Well, President Washington wasn't studying that law. He was moving us back and forth to Virginia every 6 months, just so we could never be free. It was wearing everybody out, packing up and unpacking, and the long days of travel and horse and buggy and wagons, and while we had to sleep and eat in the barns and sheds next door to the hotels and the homes of their rich friends. The Washingtons tried to keep it secret from us for a very long time, always whispering about it. But I was praying every night for my freedom. Then one day, Miss Martha received a letter from her granddaughter, Eliza Custis. Eliza wanted their blessing to get married to a British man named Laws. I was standing by while Miss Martha was having tea with her lady friends. Then she made it known that she would give me to her granddaughter as a wedding gift. I was horrified. Eliza Custis was a terribly spoiled, miserable little wench, and her fiancé had 2 children with a woman over in India. His reputation as a gentleman was that he was not. I would rather die than to serve and slave for Eliza Custis the rest of my life. But I had no choice in the matter. For 12 years, I had served Miss Martha, and now I was to be discarded like the scraps from a dress, like an object. No one asked me how I felt about being given away like a piece of furniture. I knew Eliza Custis would treat me badly. She was always rude and nasty to me when she lived with us at Mount Vernon. And then Miss Martha had the nerve to joke out loud in front of everybody that Eliza's husband would love me because of his fondness for women of color. Oh, it was then and there I made up my mind to find a way to get as far away from these people as I could. So one Saturday night, May 21st, 1796, whilst they were packing up to go back to Mount Vernon, I was packing to escape. I didn't know where, for I knew that if I went back to Virginia this time, I should never get my liberty. I had friends among the colored folks of Philadelphia, and I had my things carried to the docks beforehand. So I quietly left the house while they were eating dinner. When I reached the port, the captain of a cargo ship named Nancy, he helped me on board. Oh, it was sickening. For 5 days, the smell of molasses, coffee, potatoes, and human excrement lingered in the salty air. The boat tossed on the rough seas as I was stowed away on a blanket in the bottom of the ship with the cargo. For fear someone would see that I was a negress in the daytime, it was only at night I would come up to find relief and breathe the spring sea air. I kept my mouth shut, my head down, and I prayed. I soon learned that my God hears prayers and listens to the poor and needy when we cry. When we finally arrived at the last stop, it was a place called Portsmouth, New Hampshire. As I stepped off onto the dock, the captain pointed out to me one colored man waving at me. He took me by the hand as if I was his own child. Prince Whipple. Prince Whipple had fought in the Revolutionary War, and he was free. He was now secretly helping runaways to get their freedom. He took me to his home, and his wife helped me find work as a domestic servant. They were so kind to me. I was allowed to save every little bit of money I made. I was starting to love my freedom already. I stayed close to the free colored folks in Portsmouth. I attended a church where I learned to read and write from the Bible. I met and I married Jack Staines. He was a free man, so handsome, and a blackjack seaman. Jack wasn't always home, but he was a good man and made a decent and honest living sailing the cargo boats. To help out, I took in sewing, just like my mama had taught me. Jack and I were blessed with 3 beautiful children, Nancy, Eliza, and William. I made my own life in freedom as I loved and cared for my family, and we all lived free for the rest of our lives. 2 days after I ran away, the Washingtons put an ad in the Philadelphia paper for my capture. Twice they tried to bring me back into bondage. The first time, Massa Wash had a friend put on an advertisement in the paper for a domestic servant. It was paying a lot of money, so I applied for the job. But the man was asking so many personal questions. I realized it was a trick, and he confessed that he was to get me on a ship that would safely carry me back to Mount Vernon. Oh, surprisingly, he accepted my terms that I would be free once the Washingtons died. Well, I tricked him. And the next morning, I never showed up to go back to be a slave in Virginia on that boat. Instead, I prayed. And I asked God to forgive me for telling that lie that I would meet the boat. Now, all this was done in secret by Miss Washington because Miss Martha was so angry that I had ran away from her. She constantly nagged her husband to find me. They even made a public statement that there was no reason for me to run away as they treated me like I was their child. But who gives their child away to slave for someone else? The second time they tried to capture me, my Jack was away at sea. I was in our little cottage sewing and minding our little Nancy, our little girl. Suddenly there was a terrible bang at the door. I opened the door and Washington's nephew, Mr. Bassett, pushed himself inside my home when I told him I was free and it was my choice to remain so. He cussed and threatened. He said he would return with chains to bring me and my child back to Mount Vernon. Oh, he slammed out the door. And I was terrified again. All I could do was pray. Then a soft tapping came on my door again. The voice whispered, "It's Joe, Miss Ona." And I opened the door. It was Mr. Langdon's servant, Joe. And Mr. Langdon was a friend of Mr. Washington, but Mr. Langdon knew that slavery was wrong, and he was a secret abolitionist. Bassett was staying with Mr. Langdon in his home, and he had told Mr. Langdon that he was going to get chains and come for me and my child the next day so that he could take us back to Mount Vernon. Mr. Langdon sent Joe to warn me. I made haste and packed up and hired my neighbor's carriage and driver, and I held tightly to my little girl as we escaped to Greenland, New Hampshire. Oh, we were welcomed by the Jacks family and stayed with them until my husband returned from sea and he took us back to our cottage back in Portsmouth. My Jack, he wasn't afraid of nobody, not even the paddle rollers. He would clean his rifle and his gun, laughing like a madman. He dared anyone to try and come steal us again. Well, time went on and President Washington, he died in 1799, and they never bothered me again. Living in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, we worked very hard, and it was very cold in the winter. Our son Bill, he took off to be a seaman like his daddy, and he died at sea. My two beautiful girls, they used to sell their arts and their crafts in the open market, and they both died of pneumonia. Not long after that, my husband got sick and he died too. I was alone and so lonely when I was invited to return to Greenland, New Hampshire, to live with the Jack sisters. We helped many runaway Africans on their journeys to freedom, some as far off as Canada. Yes, I loved freedom, not just for myself, but for everyone. In the 1840s, I gave 2 interviews to the Granite Freedman and the Liberator newspaper. The man asked me questions on how I escaped. Do I regret running away from such a wealthy family? No, I never regretted it. Why should anyone regret escaping from the horrors of slavery? But aren't all men and women created equal and endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I should think so. Today, I send a special thank you to the good people of Philadelphia, Portsmouth, and Greenland, New Hampshire, for offering hope and goodwill to the many brave runaway Africans seeking freedom. Personally, I've always cherished and been grateful that in my heart, body, and my soul, as I so boldly told Mr. Bassett, I will tell you now, I am free and have, I trust, been made a child of God by the means. Thank you kindly for listening to my story, as I am Mrs. Ona Maria Judge Staines, hoping you have a pleasant evening and good night. 'Cause I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Oni, oh my heavens. That was lovely. Just absolutely lovely.
Thank you.
How old was she when she died?
She was 73.
Ah, very good.
She was
Oh, that is so
73.
good.
And she lived in, she died in Greenland, New
Uh-huh.
Hampshire.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank the writer of the books,
Mm-hmm.
Erica Armstrong Dunbar,
Uh-huh.
who wrote the story of Ona Judge
Okay.
that I use for my research.
Lovely.
And also she wrote the young readers edition
Oh.
that I prefer for
Uh-huh.
my research.
Uh-huh.
And also Imperfect God by author named Wiencek.
Oh. And what is that about?
Oh, it's about George Washington and him as a slave owner, owner of enslaved
Oh
Africans.
my.
And it's wonderful. I have links to all three books at my website under
Mm-hmm.
her stories,
Okay.
and also a link to a book that my great-grandfather owned over 100 slaves in Santee County on my
Uh-huh.
paternal side of my family. It's called A World Turned Upside Down, and it's of my paternal great-grandfather.
Honestly, only thank you. Thank you. It was just absolutely fantastic.
And I want to
Absolutely.
thank everyone who came tonight. Thank you. And all my wonderful trailblazing women. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we're going to now turn to Carol. And because Carol has going to give us information. Carol?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for the wonderful storytelling tonight, and I wanted to thank the audience. And I want to thank everybody who is involved in helping us produce this program. I'd like to thank especially Sue Kessler, and our tech host, John. Where are you? I'm going to say our tech host, John. I want to thank Lynn Torrey, who did the graphic for us, who volunteered to do the graphic. And she was doing it at a time when she was really doing a lot for the Toronto Storytelling Festival. So I really want to thank her for that. And
You're going to mention about the story circle?
Yeah, I'm getting to it. Yeah. So we have since we started partnering with Assist, we have created a Her Voice Returns, Friends of Her Voice Returns idea circle to help with coming up with the new events, to help find tellers or come up with idea for themes, or if somebody has an idea that they want to be a guest curator. That hasn't happened yet, but I think it will happen. So the next meeting of the Circle of Ideas is Thursday, June the 26th at 7:30 p.m. And this is on Zoom. So I think that the link is going to be put in the chat.
Yeah, it is. It has been. Mhm.
Yeah. And we have, I just want to say that this event is partly due to the input from the Circle of Ideas. It was because of, I believe, Kristen Pedamonte, who suggested that we approach Kate Knudsen for her portrayal of Rachel Carson. So it was because of the idea circle, and Oni was out one of the idea circles and said that she had a story that would fit with Trailblazing Women. So I want to also thank the idea circle for their help in the production of this program and their ongoing help in the production of future programs. And speaking of future programs, we have two Her Voice Returns events in the works. So save the dates if you would like to see what we're going to be doing. On Saturday, September 27th, the theme will be Shape-Shifting Women. And that's going to be like folk tales about women who change from the form of a woman into some other kind of form. Usually it's an animal, but there's a lot of folk tales about shape-shifting women. And on Saturday, November the 1st, we are going to have an event with the working title of Women's Intuition. The title might change a bit, but stories about women's intuition. So those are our upcoming things that we're working on. So do you have anything else that you want to add, Susan?
Yes.
Okay.
We would like to make a suggestion in terms of donations. I'm just looking to see whether or not the link can be posted for Artists Standing Strong Together. I guess John will get that in a few minutes. And I also want to acknowledge all of the tellers. And if we could just have them up one by one. There's Carol, there's myself, there's Rachel and Oni and Goldie, if we could all come up. And also include Carol, because Carol helped co-produce. Yes, and Oni, wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tellings. It was just absolutely fantastic. And there we have Carol. Great. So we're all together. Thank you very much for coming. And I'd like to thank the audience for coming. It was great. We were a great audience. Carol's already talked about the events that are coming up with Her Voice Returns. And we'd also like you, the audience, for those of you who will, to stay around because we're just going to you can have some conversations with the tellers if you'd like. So many thanks and see you the next time.